I'm Bill Hemmer. This is Hemmer Time. Well, hello there.
Well, hello.
How you doing?
This is my first time on Hemmer Time. I listen to Hemmer Time.
Do you?
I love it.
Well, you're kind to say that.
I like it when you do interviews about technology.
Yes.
Those are my favorite.
I like those too. By the way, your name is?
Oh, Dana Perino.
So we're doing this on Thursday afternoon around the 12 o'clock hour. And we started our new show on Monday. And then we went to Washington for the festivities
for 3
in
weeks.
D.C. And then with the inauguration on Wednesday, now we're back in New York to have a little gab session here. I don't know what we're going to talk about. I really haven't mapped anything out. But I get the sense that we'll easily be able to navigate
We'll
this.
fill this time.
I have a question for you.
Oh, okay.
Did you like being in Washington this past week?
Not really. Now, I love what we do. And I love my new opportunity to work with you on America's Newsroom. It feels like the right show at the right time for me. I feel energized in the morning. I feel a little bit unprepared. You know, I like to be really well read before I do anything. Like when I was press secretary, I wanted to make sure that every single time I went in the briefing room that everyone in there knew that I knew more than they did. And that was my power. Mm-hmm. And I have felt a little bit deficient.
How
with
did
this new
you
schedule.
figure out how to I mean,
The press secretary job?
I mean, I remember you set your alarm for 4:12.
Well, yes, my alarm was set for 4:12. No, my alarm was set for 4:20, but I would wake up at 4:12.
Gotcha.
And I would always watch.
Oh, that was the kicker.
Yes, sorry. Yeah, I would always wake up before my alarm. I kind of always have. It's very unusual for my alarm to actually go off. Mm-hmm. And I feel like it's like a failing, a personal failing if my alarm goes off. I remember President Bush one time, towards the end of the administration, I said something about having to get up in the morning when he moved to Dallas, and he said, you know, I've woken up before I haven't needed an alarm in 24 years. And I said, yeah, you have a butler. Like, you don't need an alarm. Like, somebody's going to come and get you. You're not going to ever be late.
Did he disagree with that?
No, he just laughed. He laughed.
Oh my gosh,
that was true. But I would read. I would always read as much as I could for what I needed to do that day. One of my problems is I'm interested in everything, and so from foreign policy to technology. I want to understand the world of finance better, so I could get really lost into the Financial Times. But a lot of those things don't necessarily have to do with what I have to do in the briefing that day or for the show now. So I created a thing called my weekend reading folder, and it's either an email, I email it to myself, or I print it out. So for something, I'm like, oh, I really want to read that. I put it in a folder and I save it, and then at some point on Saturday or Sunday, I'll get that done. And I can read pretty quickly. I've felt this week that I haven't been able to read quickly enough.
Well, let's talk about that, shall we?
Do you have a trick?
Well, I think the key to our job is to pay attention to everything all the time.
Yeah, it's nonstop.
Because you never know when that story is going to pop up, and you think, because I think the same way. Like, I believe that our best defense is preparation.
100%.
And I don't want that story to pop up when we're on the air, and I'm like, oh, what is that? You know, did I miss it? And I live a little bit out of paranoia.
Right, because the worst thing, like for me, especially as press secretary, is I didn't ever want to be asked a question that would just catch me out or surprise me. But more important than that, that's fine for me, because I could say, let me check on it. I'll get right back to you. I will tell you, I have a little claim to fame in White House press secretary world.
Yeah, that's good.
President George W. Bush says that anytime I briefed him for a press conference, he never was surprised by a single question. And that's about preparation.
Wow.
So you have to know what the stories are, and you have to know where the stories are going, and you have to know the reporters well enough to know, okay, John Doe, he's going to want to get on air tonight, and the only way that network's going to let him on air is if it's going to be about this story, because I watched that show last night. They're obsessed with whatever it is, immigration, COVID, whatever. So I could go in and tell the president, all right, you're going to take questions today. You know, there's 30 reporters in the room, probably go 45 minutes. Here's a seating chart. and we didn't choose like you do this. We had a tradition that you always did the wires first, and then went to the networks after that.
So that was AP and Reuters. Then,
I don't know why traditions are sometimes just traditions, and I inherited that, and I thought it worked very well. The AP reporter and the Reuters reporter were excellent, Terry Hunt and Steve Holland. And from there, they would go around. But not only could I guess the question they were going to ask,
wow,
I could guess the tone and almost the exact language, and I could mimic them, and it would just crack 43 up. And sometimes he would say, yeah, I got it. I'm like, no, let's hear how you're going to say it, because I know it's not your first rodeo, but you have to practice like you play.
Yeah.
So, and especially, we were dealing with a time of war, and not only were our troops listening, but our allies are listening, but the enemy listens too.
Mm-hmm. Can you do that now when you're watching a briefing?
Yes.
Really?
Yes. Sorry. But I really did love that job, and I can watch it and I'm like, okay, here we go again. And I have to say, even though I know that the press has been terrible to the Trump administration, there were so many times where I'm like, why aren't they following up? These are 10 questions I would follow up with. And there were times when we would finish a press briefing in the Bush White House, we'd go back up to my office and look at each other and say, how in the hell did I get away with that? Like, they didn't even ask this or that. How did they let me out of the room without asking me this? But okay.
Wow.
Moving on.
There's a book out. It's called Only the Paranoid Survive. Can't remember who wrote that. It's like 20 years ago.
Look, I wouldn't be paranoid if everybody wasn't against me.
I got it. I got it. Okay, so 5 things I don't know about Dana Perino, and 5 things Dana Perino doesn't know about me. You know what's interesting about it? I don't think a lot of people understand this, but you and I go back 10 years?
15 years, maybe?
15? Okay. 2000, that's right. 05? 05.
But I've been watching you for years.
I've been watching you too. But we have this television marriage now, and so it plays out very publicly, like how you react to a story, how we react to each other. But I think what people don't know is when we travel, whether it's a convention or a primary or a caucus or an election night, I always find myself gabbing with you. Mm-hmm. And I can't say that about everybody, but we I don't know, maybe this is a good thing or not. We get into the trivia of the story in ways
subtleties.
And the ways that I think are required to do the job effectively. Is that?
I totally agree with you.
Am I going too high with that?
Nope, I totally agree with you. And that's why a lot of times I'll have the TV on, but I like to read. Mm-hmm. Because you can pick up on things like how a quote from somebody, or they blew me off, they wouldn't answer this, or they walked right by me in the hallway. I'm like, okay, so he doesn't want to talk about that. Why doesn't he want to talk about that? Well, I'll tell you why. It's because he's expecting a primary challenge, or on and on. Like, I find that if you know like the little bit of subtleties, it's really important. I'm going to tell you a challenge I think I'm going to have. I don't know how you feel. There's a lot of new faces in Washington, D.C. That I don't know yet. A lot of freshman members.
Biden administration or
Both.
Congress?
No. I think look, there's a lot of new Republican congressmen, men and women. We've seen them a little bit on air, but there's a lot of them, and I need to get to know them a little bit better because there's been a significant amount of turnover since Boehner left the speakership. So I have some work to do to try to get to know all of them.
Well, you got time. How do you like the new job, by the way? Is it too soon?
No, no. Well, look, I met my husband on an airplane, and we got married 6 months later. So, I can make decisions pretty quickly.
Okay, so
I have a good sense right away.
Pressure's on. Then it's day 4. Are we going to make it or not?
I knew at 9:20 at our first break on our first day that I absolutely loved it.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm going to give you more time.
I don't know.
Because at some
what
point,
about you?
Well, I love it. I love the commercial breaks. I think they should broadcast those.
I know, but then I see that we've said that about the 5 too, but then they're not as
good, as effective, right? Because there's something about putting the microphone on and turning on the camera that's just not natural.
The commercial breaks are like that time in my office after a press briefing where we would say, did you hear? What in the world was that? Did you see that? What was he wearing? What in the world's going on? I mean, not that we're that petty because we would never be that petty. But I did yesterday. Well, I'm not a little bit off topic. There have been some backdrops in some of these guest homes when they're doing.
They've been memorable.
I'm like, wow, what is that? And it's kind of distracting, to be honest.
I like the pieces where the New York Times has done this, where they blow up the background to try and figure out what the guest is reading. You've seen that, right?
Oh, yeah, totally.
They blow up the title.
Did you know?
Blah, blah,
No, did you see the article in the Washington Post about how there's somebody who will come to your house and do your library, your book, like your home library for
It's
you,
good business.
so you can look like. I mean, isn't that the most Washington story? It's Washington
right.
in a.
For the full podcast, go to foxnewspodcast.com.